Hello, everyone. The title of this morning's episode is Studying the Natural Movement of Language. And I think I'm just going to retitle it The Natural Movement of Language. And we can say lecture on studying nature's truth. Nature has two sides to it. It has a known side and it has an unknown side. The known side exists through attention and language, and they're in a fusion. The unknown side will come across as unconditional to our self-conceived conditions. For me, I thought, what is this story of the world? That there is truth in its own world and in a world beyond its world? Sometimes I have my wonder goes further than my knowledge. And in those moments, I automatically have already put down any sort of conclusion. You kind of are found in a sort of naked moment, a moment of a sort of inner, you can't bullshit yourself anymore because it's this one moment of life that your attention is for the first time aimed to penetrate its depths. Trust me, behind like our mind or what is considered the mind can be seen as there's a view on the surface of the ocean and then there's the depth of the ocean. And the deeper you go within the depth of the ocean, in some sense, the deeper your existential view becomes. And it deepens to a point where it loses color and the transparency of the attention is rediscovered. So I'm coughing with excitement, guys. This is coughs of excitement. To me, it seems in a moment there is an evolutionary body that, in the access of its visual sensory perception, begins to, in some sense, stabilize itself in a condition of the world. And if you realize, in some sense, if your mind could be seen as a vehicle, or let me say it, your memory is a vehicle, the first key in the engine is the idea of yourself and how your idea of you wakes up to the day. What I mean by that is there have been moments where I have not slept, and there have been moments I've slept. And when I say slept with the pure intention of just sleeping, but on the nights that in some sense I'm kind of like as if there's a fire burning outside of your consciousness, and you can't just sit still and do nothing. The responsibility of the world of your consciousness that is perceiving it in a design begins to hit you. You become responsible for existential phenomena as a moment of being. This is what, like, I feel what, like, where spirituality will lead the person to a recognition of the inseparability of the individual notions of activity and the collective experiences of activity. You see, we're in a position where some ideas have been revealed in the vastness of history, but many ideas have not been revealed. I want you to imagine now we could kind of look back at Edison and be like, holy shit, this dude made the light bulb back then. But we're gonna kind of see like as if inventions are like fruits waiting to be picked from the trees of the branches of knowledge. So when you study natural movement, you're pretty much studying how life is happening. When you study how life is happening, you find you first find the border, find the veil of thought. The veil of thought is to acknowledge the dualistic frame of existence and to begin to recognize that the edge of the physical universe is the inner world. And the inner world is not, I'm not trying to tell you like there's a fragmentation. I mean, like the most basic fragmentation is that we could say if our brain functions through two hemispheres, we can also conclude that there's two ways the world is being seen, or in some sense being acknowledged. One where there's more creative allowance, as if the gods of ancient Indian culture, what were the names? Vishnu, Brahma, Shiva. These were, in some sense, the ways that the mind understood the character in the story. So you got to kind of see like a part of this life is being simulated by biological phenomena, but the biological phenomena has led to a state where if you look at every other human being on this planet, compared to other animals, as if we're standing in a room of superior intelligence. When you look at that like pigeon walking on the street, you're like, that pigeon has no idea of the rules of the street. It has no comprehension of what higher minds perceive the world to be. So for me, I've automatically fallen in a sense where anything spiritual has to have an inner, it's like an alignment of your emotional reality and your subjective reality and your objective reality. Your emotional reality is in some sense induced by your subjective reality. That means a man with very few thoughts has very few emotions. So what I'm trying to get to is that eventually the human being, after spending a lifetime learning from outside himself, him or herself, whoever the being is, whatever the self-awareness functions as, because this talk of mine, I'm giving it in a way where if it was on another planet, it would work. It would still have an audience. Because what I'm saying seems to be like existence has developed, at least in this universal sector, a sort of self-aware biological program. Now, this self-aware biological program is reaching limits of its story where it's beginning to wonder if it's just a body that's howling a brain around, howling a mind around, or if it's a mind projecting a body. That means at the edge of our awareness of our temporary life, we find our eternal gaze. And in some sense, what that means is that a drop from the heavens has fallen down in complete isolation and complete terror into chaos. And as this drop is falling from the heavens, looking at the sky, why have you befallen me in the universe? The gods beyond the clouds, why have you made me into a raindrop fallen into, an unknown world. And so as this raindrop is falling, suddenly this raindrop makes contact with the ocean. And it begins to see what it could not understand in a vertical dimension, in a horizontal dimension, was destined to be, or in some sense was. So for me, I'm saying just like how a drop can have an individual identity and then go into the ocean and no longer be an individual phenomena, yet at the same time not have anything reduced from its existence, pretty much lifetimes by the very self-conscious are being cultivated as a sort of momentum of attention into freedom. Pretty much all the word spirituality, you tell me, I'll tell you, it has circled. The concept of spirituality can be found in any community of people wondering about the beyond. It's a sort of ultimate exploration of the inner character that is living a story of life of happiness, sadness, suffering, and all these toys of emotions to play with. For me, life gains a seriousness that you kind of become a sort of, it's like that general's quote where they say you gotta serve before you can command. So in some sense, you gotta kind of be attentive to your subjective reality and if your life is being dictated on the validity of what you think is real or what you know is real. When you are drawn to your knowledge, to your own knowledge, that means you want to wonder where your intelligence arises from. You will study the moment in a way where you will come to a sort of ultimate simplicity. So that means when one goes towards truth, a lot of philosophies and ideas on the world begin breaking. Because truth has to do with the directness of the experience rather than the indirectness of the effect of what the experience thinks is going to happen. The future was discovered by us. The future wasn't always here. What I mean by that, some people are going to be like, Mr. Within, what do you mean the future's not always here? And let me tell you why. Because the future conceptually was discovered. Every idea that I'm saying, and not every idea, but like some of them I guess are new, but like what I'm saying is language was made before I was born. And it had evolved for a long time. And it had become a sophisticated tool that when my mind kind of engaged with language, I mean, I'm not a person I could speak like, one more other language fluently, so as if like I'm in two rooms, but I know definitely there's people who can speak many languages. I haven't studied language, not language, the nature of language or the philosophy or the science of language. I haven't studied different languages. But what I'm kind of telling you is that if there is a sort of blindfold of self-simulation going on in your intelligence, this blindfold of self-intelligence is being kept by language. And when you study the language that you have accepted to be your world, this is why many people who become linguists, they become incredibly intelligent. Because they begin to see how every language, in some sense, has a sort of cultural touch to it, as if the concepts arose from the community, from the social, from the tribe arose different values of the tribe, different parts of the social mind. I have had moments of great serenity with the world, like in front of my eyes. I've experienced great harmony in this lifetime, and I've also experienced a sort of great harmony behind my eyes. That means I've closed my eyes, and then the conclusion of that attention has justified reality. And it has justified reality through a sort of the moment you close your eyes, you're living in your memories. Yet these memories are momentary projections, and so it's as if there's this momentary projection of momentary generation and projection and reception and expression of imagery going on in your moment of intelligence, but then you choose whether you want to connect this to the story of the future or connect this to the story of the past. Because as we evolved from a evolutionary creature, I find that like, okay, so this evolutionary creature first separated itself from the world. It was like, okay, that's the world, this is me. But as it did that, it eventually began sort of acknowledging itself, and it was like the first spark of the subjective evolution. These are terms I use, you know. And nature wakes up. Man was just a moment until the moment became man. Then man realized he could consciously be the moment. And then language gained a purpose that the objectivity could understand. That means your body stands under your thoughts, and your thoughts are the origin of your attention, fundamentally. When you study your attention, you kind of understand why the ego is not asking other egos. It's using its own intelligence. Your own intelligence eventually at its core will be felt as a sort of rhythm of the world. As if you're this biological antenna, and intelligent moments in your life is based on how alert you are to how your mind is being the moment. So in one angle, we're a body projecting a mind. In another angle, we're a mind projecting a body. Now, if we are a mind projecting a body, that is a suggestion that our intelligence is kept by the unknown. So what I'm saying is, guys, this is an exciting time to be alive because we're recognizing how much we don't know. As knowledge expands, as more of the forest is in some sense discovered, then suddenly one sees how vast the forest truly is. How complexity can become so incredibly complex that we will feel as if we have created a dimension in our own dimension. You see, that's the power of the ability to self-inquire. A lot of people feel like they have to do something for meditation. No, it's just an appreciation of your existence. But it's a true appreciation of your existence, where you begin aligning your reality based on honest experiences rather than too much abstraction. Like in some of these talks that I give, I'm pretty much trying to believe it or not, indirectly get a renaissance going. Because I feel like, what are we but passing moments? You go look at the scientists, you ask for hope, they tell you you're stardust. You're like, great. You go to the religious community, ask for hope, they're like, okay, heaven or hell. You're like, damn it, great. You go to a spiritual community, they're like, eternal incarnation, chill out, and you're like, damn, that's not the way. And you eventually begin to see that the greatest response of your era comes from the knowledge of your era. This is where books become like how back in the day, the family members, the knowledge, those who were truly known to the person would come and in some sense say farewell as the soldier went on to the battlefield, a battlefield without unknown outcome. For me, it was incredible. Like when I watch Game of Thrones, there are moments where I'm just wondering if that was real, how intense would the experience be? What would be the psychological repercussions of just a person just suddenly seeing something valuable leave? In some sense, what was the quote? It was like, when a Targaryen is born, like a coin is flipped, and the world holds its breath. That's kind of like spirituality, guys. Now, to give this lecture substance, I'm going to kind of say that every person has a sort of intuitive governance to their intelligence. This intuition this in some sense intuitive intuition, it is in some sense how from the unknown your knowledge has come, and so it first wants to seek its own certainty, and then it begins to see it is born in the unknown. So in some sense, I will tell you, a part of my intelligence in some sense surrendered. It surrendered to the inevitable. And the inevitable was the edge of my thought, was the edge of how far my attention could, in abstract ways, move the duplicate, move the simulation, the linguistic simulation of the world. That means, believe it or not, we can't see the real world. We are functioning in a story of the world. What the real world is, it will automatically be insensitive because primarily as creatures, our attention has just focused, it has only given certain behaviors value, so the civilization is evolving very slowly. Because many parts of, many gifts, many talents of the species is not being acknowledged. There's literally 8 billion, people here, and some people are worried about overpopulation. I'm like, Jesus Christ, let's worry about that. Let's see that these people are not just people. They are active minds. And these active minds divide into groups of chaos and order. However, the order has an advantage the chaos doesn't have. The chaos unifies, that means different chaotic groups, they unify when it's the same order they want to break. It's a sort of battle psychology. But it could be seen as for organizations, for groups. So in some sense, what I'm trying to get to is that you evolve your eyes and your world evolves. But this evolution requires conscious activity. And conscious activity is that holy shit moment where you realize after billion years of evolution and our ancestors, living till the next day, now we're all here. Now we all have a unique attention. I'm pretty much looking at our species and saying, guys, we don't realize what we are. And we're so bogged down by false beliefs that, trust me, our ancestors had idol worship. Now society, it's in some sense sad. It's based on idea worship. People are worshiping different ideas whether they like it or not. What that means is what worship is your main attention. Where is it? And for most people, this is, for me, religion was a sort of warning sign for the world. It was a kind of post-apocalyptic warning sign, as if you do not acknowledge what you are, you will fall into an illusion. Sometimes people think stories should be taken for granted. Sometimes when someone tells you a story, it's not per se they want you to just believe it blindly in a certain behavior. They want you to see something. As Henry David Thoreau said, it's not what you're looking at that matters, it's what you see. So throughout your day, a lot of people go and say, yo, intelligence, intellect, and you kind of see those people with top hats and pipes and acting as if like they're earning encyclopedia. Like in the movies or something, And I'm telling you, honestly, academia, it exists to serve the collective vision. It's as if, like, how can I tell you? Chaos is tamed by the endless presupposition of order. And this endless utopic attitude to a chaotic world will in some sense create a sort of feedback loop of a learning process. The blindness of our species is making us kind of rage against the dying of the light, rage against the clarity to be found. The greatest treasures of our species, it's not gold, it's not stuff, it's not mansions, it's not luxury. It is vision. Vision is the currency of an advanced civilization. Because the currency of a civilization, when it occupies most of the attention of the civilization, then that civilization is all playing one game. As if there's infinite games, various ways that people can live, yet they're all living based on a certain structure. A structure that evolves slower than they do. And whenever that happens, like, people get fed up, Whenever the politics is blind to the country, then it's like it suddenly becomes like an unknown entity. And the worst feeling human beings can get is that, in some sense, like, safety is an illusion. In a world where language starts wars. Do you see how important language is? And language does not just language does not have only the ability to just set ablaze to an outer field, but it has an ability to set a blaze to an inner field. And you must be careful, because regardless of whether you see your activity throughout the day as good and bad, there is an intensity expressed. And the expression of that intensity is your karma. Sometimes your karma is, if you notice, it's based on the intensity of the action. As if the intensity of the action based on that current design seems to be an echoing consequence. So anytime your intelligence feels that something is off, that is a state of clarity to search for truth. Fear makes you incredibly honest, but then gives you a reason to be incredibly dishonest. For me, the best wisdom I've understood for now is not to be a creature of thought. to study the natural movement of language, but not to be a creature bound to language. In the silence, the whole universe is found in a sentence. Just like the word universe, life is like one verse. It is one, how can I tell you? It's like this vast biological program. And into the way the program is functioning, we don't know if we are characters in a video game of material existence, material simulation and phenomena. And at the same time, we don't know if it is just a machine that's been left, as if God made something and then was no longer in the room, as if truth was hollow even though it had the shape of the ultimate. The value you see in yourself, you will see in others. If you suddenly discover an incredible movement of inspiration within you, you will suddenly wonder it in others. For me, the value of my lifetime, I'll be honest, I can't play along with society's games all the time. It is a savageness. It is a sort of brutality to the freedom of the inner self. But that brutality of the inner self advances the survival, as if like a part of you has to live for your body, so you hold the sword. A part of you has to live for your mind, so you hold the shield. Because trust me, any weapon that's held, I find that like true martial artists know this. Their result of the fight is based on what state they are in as the activity occurs. And there are warriors who blindly, in a sort of terrified rage, run into the battlefield. And there are those martial art masters, those warriors in the battlefield back in the day, imagine, that they would in some sense be in a vast, like in like a chaotic battlefield, but in the way they would look at it, their subjective reality was at ultimate peace. As if in their mind, the master fighter is walking in a garden, but outside his hand is moving with the gentleness of that state of mind, and in some sense in a battlefield. So in some sense that means ultimate alertness. Because your mind knows better. Your mind has attained a sort of, and you have cultivated an ability where even though the world changes, your mind does not, the core of your mind. The soul of your mind is the unknown. And it is evoked in different ways. And many people, because they want things to just be objective, have been terrified of the exploration of the subjective realms. For me, it baffled me. It's as if like every tradition I look, they're like, don't go into thought. Don't seek the end of thought. It's a waste of time. Constantly, I've noticed this pattern in different wisdom traditions, as if they have a sort of forbidden attitude to behavior that takes you away from the light of God, from the light of a sort of ultimate truth. Because I'll tell you, like, you can have a very, like, let's say a yogi be at a bus stop and like a businessman be there at the bus stop, CEO of a company. And in some sense, the businessman, imagine, tells this yogi, I'm late for work, do you believe this? And in that moment, the yogi says, pretty much the idea is like, the yogi says, my karmic debt isn't over in this material existence to even move on to the next slide. As if the scale of image projected over thought, which fundamentally is another layer of subconscious emotions sub-creating the world behind you, And so, in some sense, I find that the subconscious is where the observer of language is found. As if only, I believe, truth can see truth. Do you see? As if in a certain state of mind, you're no longer at war. There's no longer simulate, like there is no longer projections of war, agitation, anger. You kind of figure out your relationship with thought. You begin to see thoughts are not you, but in certain moments you can be convinced. In certain moments when I've been angry, I have been convinced that the world I see is the only world. But there's many ways that the world exists. And the many ways that the world exists is actually behind our eyes. But it is our, in some sense, effort as creatures, as artists, in some sense, to allow a sort of gate, a sort of bridge from the inner to the outer. Because what is behind our eyes is a sort of data that, if classified properly, can be incredible. That means I'm pretty sure throughout, like even right now as I'm speaking, like today I say, there will be people on this planet who have seen many ways that world peace, let's say for example, could have occurred. Let's say in like based on how many people have ever lived, like even though a small percentage, but a small percentage of people just looked at the world and they found a solution. Now these people entered life, saw a way that life could improve, and yet could not share that data with the world ready to hear it. This is why you can't call yourself an artist until you've had a moment where you have created something with an originality, where it's as if the artwork is independent to any context of the external world, of your external view. You become the eyes of the moment and hence become the movement of the whole moment. Sometimes I've written this in my poetry, and I wrote it a few years ago. But sometimes when I would draw, it's as if I was not a person drawing. I was a moment. I was the whole moment just occurring, as if my sense of locality was all that was visually presented. That means for me there was no difference from behind my eyes and in front of my eyes in that moment. Because the attention had in some sense found the sort of unconditional presence of the root of thought. I remember I had a very profound conversation with my father, and it was very metaphysical. And I asked him, what, like, I don't know, somehow the conversation came to this point, where I asked them, so what is your ultimate conclusion of this life? Are we all just God looking at itself? And in some sense, in that moment, it was like I kind of realized that's what the unknown will inevitably feel like. We gotta, in some sense, make use of our knowledge and then, in some sense, transition. Like life changes. The man who denied change changed his mind immediately. For me, it's like anything you can observe can be seen as a sort of tool, can be seen as some form that, if ascribed value, can become integrated. Because we're 8 billion minds on this planet, 8 billion minds and growing. There are 8 billion opportunities of efficient application of individual realities to a collective reality. We gotta start valuing people as not just animals moving throughout the day. as evolved animals making sophisticated mouth noises. People bring with them a sophistication, a unique archive of their experiences, translated in the way that their memory is structured. Meister Eckhart, this Christian mystic from 1,000 years ago, he says, the same eyes that I see God are the same eyes that God sees me. That means this person has concluded that truth is only where truth cannot be. He has concluded that, in some sense, the empty room has no entrance or exit. When that conclusion comes, there comes a shift in the state of mind when it does not have future expectation that keep the ego's kind of desire alive. If there's no future, there's no ego. If there's no past, there's no ego. If there's a moment where you cannot relate this moment to anything, you're just the moment. This is that purified Zen state. When you enter this Zen state, you in some sense kind of become like a piano player where many options, many ways that thoughts can be in some sense designed in your attention. We have not fully studied the mind, but if we did, we would realize we were never a body. This is one of Mr. Within's playful commands to humanity. Before it was only objective evolution. Biological matter was moving and changing. Now there seems to be something else. And it seems to be that the ideas of man are governing the matter more than the matter that even allowed the idea of man to occur. So one can say consciousness was a rebellion against nature. A sort of, as if one can say in a religious context, they say Adam and Eve's mistake. You kind of begin to see man's mistake, or in some sense a sort of being kicked out of an ultimate unity. Just like how Michelangelo has this quote where he says, I saw the angel in the stone and I set it free. Similarly, it's kind of like nature saw a certain design and now we are walking through it. We are it. So for me, it's not like about behavior, because if you just focus on behavior, if you just think of morality, you can be stuck in a pattern of behavior for your whole life. You know, so I'm saying, like, guys, it's not that there's one thing you tell someone and they should go do that for their whole life and they'll be successful. Like, that's nonsense. Your attention is active. It's a living phenomenon. It moves and engages and in some sense creates momentum when it finds it as freedom. Let me tell you, we do have an animalistic side. And this animalistic side is how, like, there was a picture of an elephant who, there was a rope connected from one of its legs to like a plastic chair. And the idea was saying how your belief truly determines your strength. And the whole notion was that this elephant was probably like captured from the wilderness, and they connected it with a rope to a pole, to a giant pole, for years, for a very long time. And as this elephant began to conclude the rope cannot be escaped, in some sense now they could connect it to any illusion. You gotta fight against your own ideas of incapability, or just change your attention. The student of nature starts off doubting what he knows to then beginning to become certain in what he doesn't know. When he reaches that moment where he doesn't know, that's when novelty stares through your eyes. And some people call it channeled state, some people call it anything. I'm just telling you this, it's kind of like a moment of novelty. Any design can be released from it. All the inventions our world is looking for are right here. We just have to find them. And truth is similar. For any person who is living for a future truth, truth is not in the future. Truth is not in the past. And if I was to say truth was in the present, I would deceive you because truth is not an idea. When you understand this, you begin exploring the other ways that life is real for you. You begin to see, for example, the dimension of love is the dimension of an emotional momentum of existence. That you find yourself more engaged as a living being with different dimensions of how life can happen. After you have played the games of your emotional self, after you as a creature have had enough emotional ups and downs, you begin then wondering about mastery, but not an outer mastery, an inner mastery. And this mastery is not fueled by an ego. There's no agenda, there's no idea, there's nothing. I'm just saying you are the eyes of this universal sector. You're here once. It's a temporary biological life. But what can the combination of the objective aspects of our existence and the subjective aspects of our existence and the grand vision, where can that lead? The greatest thing you can take away from these talks is that the unknown is just waiting to be explored. You got to understand there's so many ways intelligence can function in the moment if one does not constantly react to habitual satisfaction. The greatest statement can be said to be the world was free before it had to be. Much blessings and namaste. Thanks for tuning in.